This is Linux Unplugged, Episode 3 for August 26th, 2013. Hi everyone, welcome to Linux Unplugged. It is a ship that sails proudly without its rudder. We have lots of opinions, lots of emails, but no script, no plan of action. Just a couple of guys sitting around talking about Linux, hanging out with our community, and really debating the important things in life, like, Linux. My name is Chris.
My name is Matt.
Hey, Matt.
Hey.
So, I was going to ask you something before we got into all the Linux stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Now, where do you fall on the Star Trek fandom scale? Like, are you a pretty big Star Trek guy, or do you kind of, like, you know about the cultural references, but not much further than that?
I'm not, like, hardcore, but I would say that I'm definitely well-versed, and I'm a big fan.
Okay.
Let me put it this way.
What was the last series you actively watched?
Well, I tolerate Voyager.
Oh, my gosh. Okay, that was my next question.
And see, that tells you by using the word tolerate that I'm a fan.
I know exactly where you're at. I'm dialed in now. Okay. So did you watch it while I was on the air, or have you gone back and like Netflixed it?
I went back. I actually got more out of it Netflixing the entire series, going back to pre-Kirk Pike and all the way up.
Oh, right? Wow.
So that, you got to do it right.
I have a dream of a podcast, and there's already a podcast out there doing it. I mentioned it actually in the Unplugged. That's why I just let it go. But I would love the idea of doing a podcast that just reviews every single Star Trek episode from the beginning. And it's interesting you say that, because I started and I've been rewatching the original series, one episode a week. I'll find a time where I'm working late and I'll just put it on, and it's a great companion show. Mm-hmm. And so I started picking up on Voyager again. And when you can back to back Voyager, it's kind of like Lost. Like, I did not like Lost when I had to wait a week in between big reveals.
Exactly.
But when I can just like pop on the next one, I'm like, oh, that's not so bad. It's like the stakes aren't so high.
I think you nailed it. Because for me, the first season of Voyager was just painful. Then once the characters really came into their own, and especially Neelix, that was kind of my Jar Jar Binks character. I was really having a hard time with that.
Yeah.
After a while, I really came to, I really kind of grew onto the whole Talaxian mindset.
Oh, you did? You actually,
it's kind of like, he's weird, but he's got wisdom going on.
Yeah, well, after Kess leaves the ship, his anxiety's kind of dialed down. He's not quite as obnoxious.
That was what needed to happen. Kess was a great character, but she was a little not appropriate for that particular series, I don't think.
Right. Well, I love the chat room. They've locked in on that. I said we discuss the important things in life like Linux, and so of course they've immediately started debating which distro is the best. Now, of course, the big part of Linux Unplugged is the fact that we are live. Right. And so to sort of jar everybody, now that we've got a Mumble server set up, now that we've got live people showing up, the best course of action would be to change the day we're doing the show on. That is the best thing to do at that point. Now you got everything nice and locked in. Yep. So we're going to move the Linux Unplugged live recording to Tuesdays at 2 p.m. So same bat time, same bat channel, just a different bat day. And it'll be tomorrow, only next week, because we're not doing 2 shows this week. So next Tuesday, we'll be live at 2 p.m. Plan B is on break until the end of September-ish, so I'm using that slot, and that kind of gives me some more free time to take care of some business in the Monday afternoon time.
Good stuff. Good times.
I'm all about the business. So, quick update. We do now have a working Mumble server. The issue was the Mumble server was working last week, but I had grabbed the Git version of Mumble from the Arch user repo.
Oh, that'll get you.
Yeah, the server was like, nope, too new of a version. So, Pagman makes it crazy easy to downgrade. You just essentially give it the other package name, the non-Git version. It says, oh, well, I'm going to need to remove the Git version first. And I say, yes, you may remove the Git version. And it just pulls off the Git version and pulls down the regular version. And I was up in business. So now we got a working Mumble room. We got people in the lobby, and we got a spot people who can jump in and chat with us if they want. If they want to interrupt the show, no, I'm kidding. We hope they do interrupt as we go.
I'm sure everybody's going to do just fine. And I'm glad we got the Mumble server working. That is awesome.
Yeah, so folks can join us live, and then they can actually get in the show, and it's kind of like calling in, only using all open source software. And another big thing we're doing, and I don't know if I mentioned this in the show, is So the good side is that more of Linux Unplugged is essentially everything right now except for the actual part that's streaming out to the internet is running on Linux. So we're doing the whole show on Linux. All the audio is being produced on Linux. I'm cutting and shipping the video on a Mac, but that's just kind of like it's almost just like it's like a like a little quick.
It's a little workhorse thing, Yeah.
It's because it's not really any editing involved.
Yeah.
But the rest is all being done on the GNU/Linux. You guys might be familiar with this. It was an operating system created about 22 years ago by Richard King Stallman. Are you familiar with Richard King Stallman?
I am familiar with Mr. Stallman. Absolutely.
Yeah. He created the BSD kernel that GNU/Linux runs on, and. I just put it up where I can push this until the chat room loses it.
Oh yeah, they're gonna come unglued.
So we'd love to have you join us. That way you can talk about this. But all right, I have a couple of things from last week's episode. I just thought maybe I'd just chat about with you, see what you thought. So you remember yesterday, right before the show started, I went out to the garage and I logged into my machine and my KDE session just totally dumped on me.
It went poo-poo. It was not a pleasant thing.
And then for people watching and listening to the released version of the Linux Action Show, all they get is Matt and Chris griping about KDE, but they never know why we were upset, right? Like we just were making offhanded comments about KDE being crap, and we didn't actually because if you weren't watching live, you didn't know that part. Well, the live chat room, Blackout 24 was awesome, and other folks too pointed me in the direction of a different couple of options to resolve the problem. During the show, I just backed up my .kde4 directory and started anew and logged in with a totally reset KDE setup.
Which is certainly a definite fix. I mean, it allows you to start off fresh.
Yeah, I was able to do that between show segments, and that was something. So then, through the links in the Linux Action Show subreddit, I dug through the Arch forum and kind of zeroed in on where the particular problem is. So first, the last action I took before I had any problems with KDE and KDE not logging is I updated python-sip, python-pyqt4, python2-sip, and python2pyqt4. So a couple of Python Qt things were updated. Then I rebooted like a day later after running, for a while, and then logged in and boom.
Yep.
I was like, oh yeah, I forgot I even did an update. And of course the error that would kick back at me was executable error, Plasma desktop, signal segmentation fault, without no further information. The desktop would flash a few times and I'd just be SOL. But I got people in the chat room said, all right, move that .kde4 folder. So I did that. And then I debated, it looks like if I would specifically remove the .kde4/share/config/plasma folder, like I didn't have to remove the whole KDE folder. I could have gone
just that plasma folder.
Yeah, I could have gone 3 levels deep, removed just that, and I would have not had nearly as much stuff reset to default and gotten to my desktop and then being able to kind of recover because whatever was causing that would have been resolved. Now this is KDE 4.11, the latest.
Well, it's a good experience in that you were able to learn from it and say, oh, okay, well, now I know that if it works later.
Yeah, I don't totally understand what caused it, but I do know, I see now how to fix it, and that .kde4 directory structure is actually pretty straightforward.
And also bear in mind, folks, when this is your production machine, it's kind of a big problem when that happens mid-stream, mid-show, you're getting ready to do something, whatever it may be. That's definitely kind of an anxiety thing,
Yeah, it was a little like, oh man, now great that I could just log into Gnome, and a lot of folks in the chat room and some folks in the subreddit were saying, oh, it's video card driver, got to be video card driver.
Not necessarily.
I don't know if it was right because I didn't upgrade the video card driver there, and I thought I was saying on the live stream that I had just upgraded my kernel, but that actually was not true. I had not.
Right.
It was an upgrade that was pending, but I had not actually gone through with the upgrade yet. So I don't think it was graphics drivers related. And because Gnome Shell worked and Strike Suit Zero was working just fine, I don't think it was that.
I don't think it was. And as I think the key, kind of a troubleshooting 101 thing you pointed out is that I did not change the graphics driver. So, erring on the side of obvious here, if you didn't change the driver, it's probably not the graphics card. You know what I mean? It's kind of like,
yeah.
So I think for folks to say it's the graphics driver, if it hasn't changed, nothing was executed to cause an issue in that space. So yeah, clearly we gotta catch it, get along as far as in that one directory, got it backed up now. You know what to back up in the future, and you're good to go.
Yeah, I should just make a backup of my .kd4 directory, right? And so, but I decided to go the boss level route, and I just rm-rf the whole KDE4 folder. I said, to hell with precision. So that put me back at square one with my KDE config. Now, I did something different this time. Okay, so here's the reason, too. Because I got logged in, and I sat down, and I needed to get immediately to work on LAS. Like, I thought about it, and I thought, okay, I could spend 20 minutes, like... But
it never works out that way. Yeah, you get sucked into it.
That's true. And it also, like, it would push, like, the whole release of LAS out, like, everything, like, when you delay at that level, sort of, like, compounds, because a bunch of different actions then take place later than they should. And so it's like, no, I'm just going to get right to work. And so I just sat down and started encoding video and working on the art and all that kind of stuff immediately. And so I thought, well, while the video is encoding, the Bonobo is so damn fast that I am encoding HD X264, and I got it ripping on all cores. And meanwhile, I'm like installing updates. I'm back in Packer, and I'm installing more Arch updates, and I'm configuring all my stuff. And what I decided to do this time, Matt, is I'm not going to try to keep things default. See, my first time on KDE, I was like, keep everything default and only change the stuff that really grades on me. But what that causes to happen is I don't make the change until I'm really annoyed at something. And then I'm like, I got to go change that.
So basically, instead of being reactionary to it, you're actually you're trying to map out something that's going to provide you with the experience you want.
I'm going to say, you know what? I need to customize it, and I'm going to embrace that. So what I did this time, first of all, that took off this whole, like, judginess that I had, like, is this the way I want it? Just got rid of all of that, because when at a stock KDE, I'm very judgy. Default KDE, I'm full of judginess. So I opened up the System Settings app, and I just went down every single icon, row by row by row, until I had changed every setting the way I want it. And by the time I was through most of that settings application, I was pretty much done. And this time around, my KDE setup is even more amazing than before, and I really love it. Like, I thought I liked my old setup, and I was kind of bummed, right? I was kind of like, oh man, I can't believe I lost.
Totally.
No, man, I like my new setup way more. I went a little simpler. I'm not trying to do like the launcher icons and all that kind of stuff like I was trying to do with the Unity stuff. I went, I actually took your advice, Matt.
Uh-oh.
I'm not using snaps. I'm using the built-in Krunner launcher thing.
Good. Okay.
But I'm just saying, I'm going to just launch everything with keyboard commands. So that way, like, I don't get muscle memory about where an icon is. And then, and then later, when I finally get frustrated and switch to XFCE, I'll just load up Synapse. Yeah. And I'm good to go.
That's what did it for me. For those of you that are not familiar with this, I use Synapse in the fact that I don't, as long as it's Linux and I have that installed, I honestly don't care what the desktop environment is that much, because I don't launch anything from anything else other than that. It's also how I find my documents and find pretty much everything. Yeah. It's how I manage my desktop. I don't have to know where anything is. I just start typing.
That was one of the things that bugged me on Gnome, was that I felt like the launcher only being able to search applications in this day and age was old. Like, I'm used to my launcher and being able to search document names. So if I have like a notes file that I type stuff into frequently, I can pull that up just like I can pull up an application.
Exactly.
So we got a lot of feedback on a lot of things from yesterday's episode of Linux Action Show. But maybe we could start with the GNOME 3 stuff, because that seemed to be the stuff that really pissed people off.
Oh, yeah. I think that's a great place to start, actually. I'm digging. Maybe should we start at the highs? That would be the YouTube. Which by high I mean low. Start with that.
So I'm going to dig through here. Here's a good one from Chili Di Peroni. Matt, shut the fuck up about a dock.
And that's a fair statement. It's like, okay, clearly this is someone that really loves docks. No, I'm just kidding. No, I totally get it.
No, okay, so you are right. You are right. That dock is like old. And you see, what I don't know if people know about is Dell made an entire Ultrabook that was cordless. Like, even you could hook it up to a dock. Oh, okay, I had a dock, but it was a cordless dock. So you'd set this Dell Ultrabook on top of this base station, but there was no wires, and it would do USB, Bluetooth, video, external video, everything, charging, everything, no wires. So you're not crazy.
And so that would be more. See, for me, it's a matter of I'm trying to actually look at this as progress and asking me to use technology that, granted, it's doing something new and compelling and exciting, and I think that's great. I don't want a dock. I want to use technology that I already use on Android. I don't want to step backwards because for me personally, I don't personally really see how a dock is fun it sucks. It sucks. I'm sorry, dude. It sucks. There's no way around it. I can't make it not suck. And so for me, it's like, I don't want, now I know there are people that are okay with it. That's great. You go dock it up. Go dockety dock.
All right, now.
But yeah, no, thank you.
All right, what about this stinging critique on our evaluation of GNOME 3? Here we go. Damn Harem writes, seriously, stop whining about GNOME, you retards. It's the best desktop environment out there. Everything you see on screen is configurable with JavaScript. User shared GNOME shell utils JS.
I give him points for sticking up for a desktop he's very passionate about. That's fine. No problems there. I only will gripe about something if I care. If I don't care, here's a little tidbit you guys may not know. If I'm not complaining about it, it's not because I don't have an opinion. It's because I'm not emotionally invested in it. I may still care to a degree, but I'm not emotionally invested in it. If I'm ripping on GNOME, it's because I want them to not suck. I want them to do awesome things because I know they can. They have been in the past. They probably will in the future. It's not happening right now, though.
Yeah, and I think we're just critical of this philosophy of... Yeah. Now, one of the things we got as feedback, legitimate feedback about the GNOME stuff, I thought was from Oleg here in the Linux Action Show subreddit feedback thread. He says, a little harsh in the show today about GNOME, but I don't think it went over the limit. As far as I know, GNOME Maps is mostly a Google Summer of Code project, so it's been done by a few new faces in the GNOME Linux community. I kind of speculated about that in the show. Remember, I was like,
and there had to be a reason for it, but it is kind of a slap upside the head with a brick, though, when you say, oh, look what I can do on my KDE desktop with a globe. Oh, hey, we got maps on GNOME. People are going to come to that conclusion without our help. They just will, So we're just kind of helping that along. So
he says it's still lacking planned functionality since the new geolocation tech just landed recently. He includes some screenshots. He says the ones in the blog post that we looked at were already outdated. He also wanted to point out that while we were poking fun at the display manager in GNOME, he then links a picture of the KDE one, which looks like a train wreck. Like, it looks like a train wreck hit a UI. I mean, it's just awful. But I mean, come on. Comparing something to KDE like that's not really a fair comparison. He says there's lots of stuff in GNOME developers are working on at the moment. Many of them are going to be landed in GNOME 3.10, like the high DPI, CSD, Wayland support, OS tree, freedesktop.org application installer, sandboxing, etc. All those technologies or features are going to be available for Cinnamon, Elementary, and many other desktops automatically. Your show your way, but I'm still a little disappointed at the way GNOME was presented sometimes. It gets criticism from the exact same things that other desktops get praises. But anyway, very good overall, interesting discussion. Now, do you think that last part is true? Do you think we criticize...
Oh, I think it was extremely fair, but I would put an asterisk on that and saying that personally myself, and I don't know about you, I wasn't aware of any of that other stuff. I have no knowledge of it. And maybe the reason why I wasn't aware of it is not so much that I wasn't trying to find it. It's just that it's not a visual thing you can point to. You can't say, I see the sandbox or I see that.
Right. And we mentioned the Wayland stuff was a footnote in that blog post. And you're right. It's a hard thing to visually show.
But I would love, now here, let's put this out for the GNOME guys. If any of you guys are listening, we'd love to interview you and talk about how awesome those back-end things, because that's something we can then wrap our heads around, because we can't really visualize what that's going to be like otherwise without some context.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I'd love that. I think that'd be cool.
I'm looking forward to the next few years as really Wayland hits. I think we're going to see some interesting stuff. We're going to see people break with some of the old and go with new technologies, and we'll see where things shake out. I think at the end of the day, my overall anxiety for the GNOME desktop and why it's ironic. I was paranoid that a Arch update would break a GNOME shell because I had one shell break and it made my session crash. So I stopped using GNOME, and then of course a few weeks later KDE broke on me after an update. Ironic. And I had to log into GNOME to get any work done.
And then it becomes a matter of, really, it wasn't a matter of a GNOME or KDE fault. It's just that's the nature of the upgrade process. Yeah. And sometimes things happen.
And I want to live with cutting edge software, so I'm cool with that. But
sure.
So maybe I have been too hard on GNOME. It's only because I know I touched on it in the show yesterday. I just feel like it's heavy-handed vision.
It is. And see, part of it is I come from a GNOME 2 mindset. I as boring as sin as it was, I loved it because it was simple for a long time. And so my expectations are deeply rooted in I don't know, a prejudice and hatred. I don't know if you want to call it that, but I definitely wasn't really a big fan of the whole GNOME 3 situation. I didn't like the direction. It really bothered me. I didn't feel like I was gaining something new or exciting from it. And at the time, I wasn't necessarily a big fan of KDE either, and that's what, of course, drove me to XFCE. And I've looked into Mate and other ones, and whatever. But so I don't know. I have high hopes for GNOME. I'm not belittling them because I want to see them fail. I'm belittling them because I want to light a fire under their butts, and I want to learn more about those back-end features that I'm not hearing about. That's all.
Blackout24 responded. He said, I do understand Chris's problem with the GNOME Vision problem. We're Linux power users. We want powerful and a thought-through desktop. We don't care about having GNOME 3 on touch devices. Every move that shifts the balance towards mobile and therefore ruins the desktop will be met with criticism. GNOME is catering to a target group that doesn't even exist. They're just plain wrong. Imagine your parents would spend most of their time with imaginary invisible children instead of with you.
That's just it. I mean, when I present various desktops to non-Linux users, I'd never, ever have had a person that took a look at GNOME 3 and said, ooh, I like that. Most of them said, okay, what the hell? That was generally Yeah, I mean, it was a user. I mean, they went from being the usability desktop to the what the hell desktop, and that's not to say they won't correct that. But right now, I'm just not feeling it, and most people that I know aren't either. So,
Yes, sir. All right. So just one last point. Blackout24 says that the reason why this might make someone angry is Linux has 10 plus, 10 to the power of 10 window managers and desktop environments. But let's face it. There's only 3 projects that have the manpower to deliver a desktop that is as polished enough to compete with the Windows and the Mac OS X. That's GNOME, KDE, and Unity. If one of them acts irrational, it pains us as Linux users. Just look at the GNOME weather app. Why on earth would someone want this on a desktop?
I have no idea. And that's, it's like, even if I try not to belittle this stuff, it's like they do it for me. I mean, really.
It's like you don't want to criticize someone's work because you really appreciate that people are getting out there and creating code and all of that.
Sure.
I guess if it comes free, like if it's part of like a, crazy Google's giving out Google bucks and, just go out there and create some code that nobody needs. And then, somebody created this and it's GTK and it's super minimal. So let's put it in GNOME. Is that what's happening?
It seems like it. And it's obviously stuff that they're passionate about. And a lot of times, a lot of open source projects are, in fact, derived based on personal needs. Someone needs something made for themselves, for their company, whatever it is, and they'll go out and create that. And that's fine. But it does feel like a lot of that mindset's being incorporated into GNOME in that almost the Shuttleworth style of I know best. And if you don't see what I know and you don't understand why this is a benefit, screw you. You're broken inside and you don't understand. And then more power to them if that's their view of it. For me, I'm just not able to fall in love with its current direction. They're building for a touch interface that nobody wants. They're incorporating things that I don't understand. And the really cool stuff that this person listed off in the email earlier, I want to hear more about that. I want to see less of the map thing, and I want to know more about the sandbox, and I want to know more about all this stuff in the back end that does sound compelling, that does interest me.
Yeah.
That sounds worthwhile. That has value.
Yeah, I agree.
A lot of people. So I don't
know. Blackout went on to make some really other great points. The chat room wants me to read his whole point, but I'll just say
summarize.
It's really good. I mean, he kind of points out how people will say that it's not really designed for a touch UI, that it's not touch first, but it really is when you kind of consider.
I was going to say that's frightening if it's not. Then my God, what are they? Yeah, wow. Okay.
Yeah. And he makes some good points about the notification area as well. I wanted to. I want to talk about the Proxmox project. They've just recently done an update that is not going very well for them, and we've covered Proxmox on the show. A lot of people have ended up using it because of our coverage. I was thinking about deploying it here at my house, kind of coming up. But now there's a bit of a road bump. I want to talk about that. Maybe we could also talk about some of our favorite ways to customize our desktops now that I just kind of got done tweaking my KDE setup.
Yeah.
And then DHVL in the subreddit has some tough questions for you and I about Canonical and Ubuntu. And we got a ton of Bitmessage stuff. Like the Bitmessage stuff went over well, and some people sent over some really neat projects around Bitcoin. So we got some good stuff, Matt. But before we go any further, I want to stop and thank our first sponsor this week, Ting. Ting.com is mobile that makes sense. And if you go to linux.ting.com, now this is a different code than for the big show, linux.ting.com. And this will get you $25 off your first device or your Ting service. Now, friends, you might say, Ting service, Chris, do tell me more. Well, Ting is Pay for what you use and not a cent more. You don't end up putting a bunch of money into a big contract that you don't end up actually needing all of. And also, there's no bundling. There's no secret hidden things that show up on your bill. It's just what you use and any legal taxes Ting has to charge you. That's it. And on top of that, you also get things like, hotspot and tethering. That's all fine and good. I really like Ting as a company that lets you either be completely hands-off or completely just dig in and get into the community aspect of things, get into the tech behind things. They've got resources for both sides of the camp. They also have some small business. If you've got maybe a group of people, 5, 10, 20, 30, 40 more, Ting has some really innovative small business plans you might want to go check out. Ting makes an excellent option for a small team. So go over to linux.ting.com and check out their rates. Check out their payment calculator. You can go over there, they have a little savings calculator. You put in your bill into that, tell that bad boy what's up, how much your bill is, and you'll see the savings. You'll be pretty shocked. And at that point, I think you're going to be compelled to go forward. Also, Ting just rolled out a brand new service where they'll go out and find you a refurbished Ting-compatible device. And when you use our actually, it's a URL. We don't have a code. Linux.ting.com. You get $25 off that device. Boom! So,
and I'll tell you, as someone who just recently switched to Ting, I am amazed at how simple it was to set up, how easy it is to manage, and the fact that I know exactly what my bill's going to be based on what I do. It's totally in my ballpark.
The dashboard is super easy to use, super straightforward. You go in there, you get gas gauges that tell you right where you're at, give you a visual representation. It tells you right now, this is how much you're going to look at paying. Like if I go in there right now, it's like $16 for me or something like that.
Yeah, same here. It's like literally, it's like 12 or $16. It's crazy.
Yeah. And they have a bunch of really great devices, including the wonderful, magnificent Note 2 and HTC One. And I have it, a little birdie tells me we're going to see some really exciting devices coming here very soon as well.
Ooh.
Yeah. They've got a great deal right now on the Samsung Galaxy S3 16 gig edition. This is unlocked, no contract. You own this. You are in complete control of the relationship with the mobile provider when you go this route. Think about the difference that is there. You know, I just have to put it in the stark terms that it is. In the traditional telco setup, you're essentially a victim. They lock you into this contract. They incentivize you with this phone that they subsidize to a lower price because they charge you so much more than what it actually costs them to have you on as a customer. They make so much profit off you, they subsidize those cell phones to a lower rate.
Right.
When you buy in at that level, you always are behind the ball. You always are disadvantaged. The position of power is always held by the telco. Ting flips all of that on its head. You're in power. It's your phone. It's your contract. You own it, and you only pay for what you use. Go to linux.ting.com, and thanks to Ting for sponsoring Linux Unplugged.
I think that's what you really nailed it there, is that, you know, the other telcos have you in an enforceable contract. Now think about that. I mean, they're in control of when you are in or out of their service, not you, and that sucks.
And we've seen what they do with that. We've seen what they do with that.
Oh my goodness, yes.
That is what makes me so nervous about payments going to phones. Like I know that's a huge thing that Android wants to do with the Google Wallet. I'm sure Apple's going to do something. I'm sure Microsoft would if they could. And anything that puts these, I mean, the telcos and the banks together, really? Like that's something we want? Like that sounds like the worst thing of all. Now, if only we could get a bunch of regulation involved so the government's got a heavy hand in it too.
Absolutely. And especially, and we'll make sure that the people doing the regulations are the people that used to work in those industries.
Right.
Because that's important.
Of course.
That's really important.
That way they have experience. Yeah.
And a vested interest. A cough, cough.
Oh.
Anyway.
All right. So why don't we start with the Proxmox stuff, because this is just kind of quick. And the chat room is just saying, hey, you should mention this before the show. But we do have a few folks in the on-air channel. So I thought we'd go to them and see if anybody in the on-air channel has anything they want to chime in with before we move on, because it's an open floor right now, guys.
Nice.
They're probably listening on delay. Well, go ahead, Lickety.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of weigh in on it, and I don't know if anybody's read the article or any coverage of it yet, but they released 3.1, and what they changed is that you have to have a subscription in order to access the stable repo.
Does that mean you only can use the beta version of Proxmox if you don't subscribe?
Essentially, but the source is still available. So if you get the source, you can still compile it yourself and do it that way. You just won't have that easy peasy, access to the repo right from the get-go once you put your subscription in there.
And are you a Proxmox user?
I am a Proxmox user. I've been running it for several months now, and I really like it. It's very easy to use and things like that. They've actually introduced a subscription that's low enough. It's meant for community users, and I believe it's $50 to $60 annually. That will give you access to the stable repo. So if you don't really need, help or support and things like that, you're capable of taking care of things on your own. You could just get this community subscription, which in the long run isn't terrible. I believe Xbox Live costs more than that, and you can still have access to the stable repo and things like that. But the concern from the community seems to be that there's not a clear indicator as to what's going to go into the unstable repo and what people are going to lose. So it seems like the devs are the one that are handling the PR of this situation, and they seem to be doing it poorly because their interaction within their forums seems to become more and more negative. And right now, they need to. It seems like they need to release something that is more clear cut about what's going to happen to the community of people that don't pay for a subscription, but they really enjoy their product.
So, Lickety, just so that I am kind of tracking you. So, what you're saying, as an existing Proxmox user, if future updates right now, it looks like if you don't subscribe, will only be quote unquote unstable updates. Am I following you? And you don't actually know what is going to happen?
That's what it seems like. I haven't delved deep into it as to what the details. Like I said, they haven't really come out with a lot of information about what goes into the unstable. But if you had, let's say, a 3.0 installation right now, and you upgraded to 3.1, you would lose the stable repo, and you would only have the PVE test or the testing repo. And I don't know if you actually lose any features from 3.0. I don't believe you do. You just won't have the stable repo for you.
So it sounds like, best case scenario, the direction they're going, that you have a working setup, they offer an upgrade. If you choose not to do a subscription, you're either basically stuck with what you have, or you can then go to source, or basically end up in beta.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Okay, wow.
Yeah, so it sounds like too that, and now this sometimes happens. It's kind of hard to read, but they say that you over on their official forums, the developers are like Lickety said, are the ones that they're interacting with, and sometimes when the threads start to get a little hostile, they're shutting them down. That's not too uncommon.
And that's the wrong approach. See, one of the gigs that I work is I'm the guy that works in between developers and the community, and that's bad. You don't do that. You never do that. You have a dialogue with those folks. Even if they're ripping you a new one, have the dialogue. Get it out in the open. Talk about it. Don't hide it. Don't run away from it. Oh, that's bad.
Yeah.
Don't do that.
All right. Any other thoughts here in the on-air channel? The floor is open. Going once.
Going twice.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll leave the channel. I'll leave the channel open if somebody's on delay and they want to tune in. Well, I appreciate you guys bringing the Proxmox stuff to our attention because we've covered them, and thinking about running it here at my house because right now I have two physical machines and I have VirtualBox headless on one of them, and I would like to maybe just consolidate down to one physical machine and go Proxmox. And say goodbye to VirtualBox and say goodbye to two machines because when it's warm out, it is a real pain in the ass to have all these computers on.
Oh, yeah. It just bake you alive out there.
Yeah. Okay. Before we get to the KDE custom or just desktop customization stuff, let's clear out the canonical stuff. Let's get this done with. We talked a lot about Ubuntu Touch yesterday and specifically the Ubuntu Edge campaign.
Right. And
I thought we had some good points on there. And overall, pretty good feedback. Some people thought we were a little hard. DHVL in the subreddit says the question is not simply about the Ubuntu Edge campaign. I should say I'm an Ubuntu user. I'm not an Ubuntu user. I'm a Fedora 19 user with KDE and I love it. My question is, what exactly is Canonical/Ubuntu's focus right now? Consider this. Wow, now this is kind of ironic. Now I'm not sure what he's about to say next, Matt.
Okay.
But I do find some irony in a Red Hat user asking what another distro's focus is. But I mean, a Fedora user, but that's okay. No judging. Fedora is a Red Hat testbed for new technologies. See, they hate it when you call it that. And Red Hat's going to use for enterprise Linux. OpenSUSE is a distro that is perfect for KDE and has good security, and it has YaST2, which is one of the best GUI configuration tools ever. Arch Linux is for Linux users who don't mind any amount of hassle and want bleeding edge software and like to have a fully customized distro. But what the hell is Ubuntu for? I can't say it's for new users because Unity's not really all that user-friendly. Neither can I say it's good for introduction to Linux because, well, no other distro that I know of uses Upstart or Unity or PPAs or any of that stuff. Oh, so it's not good for learning other cross skills, I guess.
It's not. And if you guys haven't seen it yet, a really good video to watch is Chris Perillo's dad uses Ubuntu. And that is a great example of what you were just saying, as far as it's not really a great distribution for new users because they don't know where the hell to find anything. It's something that gets activated, they don't know how to deal with it or how to get out of it or minimize it or whatnot. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty spot on. Ubuntu is definitely kind of losing its edge there. I've parked people in front of. I mean, the videos. I was with you until I saw that video, and it's like this is someone that's been using computers longer than a lot of our audience has been alive. So, well,
okay, you're right. I mean, so I would grant you if your only usability metric is how easy it is to figure out how to. Well, I mean, Unity's got that big old bar on the side with big old Firefox icon in there.
Launching's easy. It's managing that can get a little weird.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, launching's brain dead simple. I mean, it's really, it's not that hard to do. But yeah, I think where he really got lost is when you went into the multiple desktops, and he was trying to figure out how to get back. Now, we of course know how to get out of that, but a lot of people are thinking, okay, what happened? Did I break something? What's going on with my display? They've never seen it before.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So I think you got for that type of user. I think maybe your elementary OS might be a better route, right?
Right.
Your Pantheon desktop experience, as it were.
Exactly.
But then I look at, you got your user who knows how to use the computer.
Sure.
And they're comfortable enough, maybe they've set up a printer before, that kind of level of user, right?
Okay, sure.
I feel like for them, Ubuntu is the quote-unquote easiest distribution to use because there's such a broad amount of resources out there for somebody making the transition, somebody new. There's so much. There's Ask Ubuntu. There's OMG Ubuntu. There's all of the web update. All of the different sites out there that tailor to Ubuntu users. How do you do this? Click this button. Install this software. Copy these commands. Not necessarily always the greatest advice, but very straightforward for anybody that has at least savvy enough to craft a half reasonable Google response. They're gonna get instructions.
Yeah, they will. When I used to regularly update my matthartley.com website, most of the people I had coming in were refugees from bad advice from the Ubuntu forums. The advice that a lot of the people were getting there was so overcomplicated, overdone, overbaked, burnt, bad advice that it about made me cry.
Yeah.
So there's that, and then on top of that fact, putting the community totally aside, I'm not ranking on the community. I'm just saying there's a lot of very active people that don't know what they're talking about. On top of that, the fact that the desktop is constantly evolving, I think it was the next release of Ubuntu that Unity is almost unusable.
This is a problem. This for new users is a huge issue, and the reputation is so. I watched this. There I am Sunday. I'm editing the Linux Action Show. A lot of times I pull up Uncle Leo, and I'm watching what Lapperty's doing during his national radio show, right? And he gets the Dell Ultrabook that runs the Linux, made by
the Sputnik or the
made by Dell for developers, right? So he gets that thing. He opens it up, puts it on his desk. He's got the IRC chat room going right there on his screen. And immediately, before dude is even logged into his brand new Sputnik, chat room starts telling him, get rid of Unity. Unity's no good. Can't use Unity. And Leo's like, oh, I got to get rid of Unity? Well, so what do I do? So first thing he does, he opens up the terminal sudo apt-get Ubuntu desktop. And so then he installs his Ubuntu desktop on top of the standard Ubuntu desktop, which is not exactly perfect.
It's pretty messy, yeah.
And then he just logs out and starts using it. Never even bothers. Like he got through the intro video that Dell puts on there and then closed it. And so then caller calls up, few weeks later. I can't remember this. I think he got this Sputnik like this was months ago. And then I was watching Lapperty this last Sunday. Caller calls in because it was a Linux birthday. And he says, hey, Leo, I'm thinking about getting a computer to run Linux. What do you think? And Leo says, gosh, I tell you, I bought the Dell Linux laptop. And it was such a horrible out-of-the-box experience. First of all, it comes with this desktop environment that Canonical's made that nobody likes. He never even tried it. He says nobody likes. This is on he says million listeners, national radio show, and he says, so don't buy the Sputnik laptop. Just go buy a Windows laptop and put Linux on there if you want. That's not
which
necessarily
is absolutely wrong on every possible level.
It's not. The problem is it's not necessarily based on any actual practical use. It's based on like this folklore that happens so often on the internet. This IT folklore where we pass legends on to each other about something and we just accept it. So I guess my point is I feel like maybe Cinnamon, maybe Elementary OS is a better new user desktop just because it's more familiar.
Yeah, I agree with that. See, this is the rub. I don't hate Canonical. I don't hate Ubuntu. I dislike Unity for the direction it's going. See, again, people tend to like run hot and cold when I'm explaining this. I want to be clear on this. I don't hate Unity. I hate where Unity's headed. It's current Unity on 12.10. I could, it's a very nice desktop. I have no problem with it. It works fine. But I think where it's headed is it's heading in a very bumpy beta-like direction that's not going to give a good experience to people. Now, Leo, of course, is just talking out of his backside on that because he's not tried it and it was just basically going based on community feedback, and that's unfortunate. But I think that the Ubuntu core itself, when you are free to try out Cinnamon, you're free to try out these other desktops or even try other related distributions, is actually a very solid experience.
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah. Now, again, do I hate Unity? Absolutely not. Do I hate where Unity is headed? Yes. Current Unity 12.10, it's very comfortable desktop. Works very 13.10.
12.10. 12.04, 12.10's fine. 12.10 introduced the Amazon stuff.
Yeah, I think I'm running. What the heck am I running?
13.04 was probably, I thought, one of their best implementations.
Yeah, I think that's what I'm running. I'm sorry, it's 13.04. I get all their numbers and names all mixed up because I got all the weird stuff going on. But yeah, so I'm running 13.04. I just checked. But I don't know.
Yeah. I guess I want to toss it to the Mumble room. I see that Riley just joined us, and we have a few other folks. And I don't know if you guys in there have any thoughts on. So, Mumble folks, do you agree with DVH on the subreddit that Canonical is lacking focus for Ubuntu? His argument and his is that they're not focusing enough on the desktop. Matt's argument, the desktop isn't user friendly enough anymore. Anybody in the Mumble room want to agree or disagree?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'll give an opinion. I tend to be the IT people for friends and IT person for friends and family, so I end up, handing out USB sticks with Linux on it and trying to get people to install it when they're complaining about it's not working right or so forth, because Windows is sort of just messy and I don't like dealing with it.
Yeah.
So what I end up gravitating to is trying to get people on Linux Mint. It has a very easy interface, which I would say it's a lot like XP, or where XP would be if they built on top of it and stuck very closely with it. And I've heard other people sort of say similar things to that effect.
Right.
And
I can see that.
Yeah. So, and for me, I used to use Ubuntu. And about when I'm sorry, I'm not structuring my sentences very well, but when they introduced the Amazon lenses in the Unity HUD, I lost my faith in Ubuntu as a distribution to deliver a trustable distribution. I thought you're trying to market towards me. It's enough to put a big button in your application asking for donations, that's fine. But to actually put marketing, that would be the equivalent of in the Windows 8 start menu, you had like Google ad boxes.
Yeah.
I think that's just ridiculous, and I jump ship.
I gotcha. Anyone else want to chime in?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Corn.
I was just going to say that I used to be a big, long time Ubuntu user back, maybe 10.10 at least. Before they went to Unity, I didn't like Unity so much back then when it first came out. I think when 12.04 hit, I went ahead and tried to do the whole Unity thing. I didn't like it so much. But if I were to, suggest a Linux distribution for some first-time users, I personally would choose Zorin OS because, it is based off, a derivative of Ubuntu, but it's just more like window user-friendly. And I had someone had a computer problem where their hard drive was going bad. I later found that out. And I didn't really want to install Windows because obviously I didn't own Windows and I didn't have anything free. So I was like, I'll just sneak a Windows-like clone on there, and I threw Zorin RS on there. dude had no idea what it was. He thought it was like some new version of Windows, and he was like, "Oh, and there's an app store. This is amazing."
That's awesome.
Right. Yeah, Matt, remember what Zorn OS was the one we looked at where it's like, which UI would you like to emulate? Mac, Windows, Windows XP? That was kind of it was like, oh yeah, this is totally for Windows converts. So nice one, Corin. That sounds exactly what it's.
Yeah, I think that's a great example. Yeah.
What were you going to say, Riley?
Yeah, I'd actually take that a step further and even say Manjaro is easier than Ubuntu.
Whoa,
Because when you think about it, Manjaro you never have to reinstall. It comes with all your proprietary codecs and your graphics card support. And on top of that, you got the AUR.
I would add to that. I would say that yes, I'm running Manjaro full time, and I'm very happy with it. I would say that if being honest, and I used to support people that knew nothing about computers. I used to teach classes on this stuff. I'm fairly familiar with people that know nothing of PCs. If it's set up for them, absolutely 120% agree with you.
Gosh, that's XFCE? That is the best looking XFCE I have ever seen. Wow.
And that's not even with the dock.
The thing about using something like Manjaro too is the forums and community.
Oh,
if
man,
you add something in the Ubuntu forums, good luck. I remember, Matt, you said something about this a while back on the last, I think it was like during the Arch review, but if you add something in the Ubuntu forums, dude, you got 20 different people telling you to do something different.
Conflicting advice, too.
Yeah, on Manjaro or Arch, like it's this way, and that's pretty much it.
Right. That's exactly right. Yeah, I would totally agree with that because for me, I've actually looked at setting up Manjaro on some computers for family members with me setting it up so I know that they're not having to try and figure out why PacMac is doing something weird or whatever. You know, there's little bugs that come along because it's still a little bit beta to a degree. But it's a really good distribution once it's set up. And what's cool is if you outgrow the GUI stuff and you want to just roll Pac-Man and do it, just go straight terminal, you can do that too. It works really well. And of course, you get your Arch repos. Now, I got to state this for the record: Manjaro is not Arch. It's based on Arch. I want to be very clear on that. So it's a very, very, very different experience for very, very different goals. But it's a great distribution, and I'm really happy with it.
And you do have the regular, straight up. I mean, it has the AUR, right? So you've got.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, you can. Anything you do on Arch, package-wise, is doable on Manjaro. Absolutely.
So I keep thinking if I have to reload, I'm either going to try Antergos or however you say it, or Manjaro, but I'm not sure which one. I don't know. I mean, I might just go straight Arch again, but everybody keeps raving about these. I want to just see them. I want to try it. See if it really does break.
Plus on Manjaro, they actually have the wiki on the CD itself, so you don't have to go to a website to view the wiki. It's all on a PDF document on a CD.
Ooh.
And it's got Ubuntu-style hardware detection, too. I mean, there's no... I don't do anything hardware-wise. The only thing that was a little funky was the printer setup, and that was just my own idiocy. It was literally just a forehead slap later, and I was fine. But yeah, generally speaking, there's going to be some bumps when you first install up until you get a package update. PacMac might throw up an error or whatever. Just go to the forums. You'll have it straightened out in no time. But once you get it set up, it's great because I'll never again have to.
But for a new user, Matt, for a new user,
user, if it's set up for them, that's the key factor. Once it's set up, you're fine. I've not had one problem. Setting it up, no, absolutely not for a new user. But I'd say, at least, unless they're like maybe a experienced Linux user, and that coming from a.
I mean, if we're these mythical new users we always talk about. I mean, if there's
two types though. There's the new to Linux, and then there's the I can run Windows kind of.
And one category though isn't going to be able to install a distro no matter how easy it is because they can probably barely install Windows software.
Exactly. And so that of course is your category if you're installing it for them. And you would with Windows anyway. So my philosophy is if you're installing Windows for them, you're going to install Manjaro for them. If they're installing Ubuntu themselves, they can probably install Manjaro just fine. I wouldn't say there's really a big deal there.
Huh. Interesting. All right, guys.
Yeah.
Well, before we go to our next topic, and so Mumble Room, if you guys want to think about something if anybody has something they want to say, think on that. Take a quick break though, because I want to thank our second sponsor this week, and that is UnitySync from Directory Wizards. Now, Matt, back in the day, Matt,
back in the day,
I worked two types of jobs that dealt with this issue where you have these, well, we called them data islands. I don't know if that's what the kids call them anymore, Matt, but a data island was one of these situations where you had an application that had its own directory, maybe a database server, maybe an LDAP, maybe it's an access database, all kinds of stuff. You'd have one server that has this for like this application and one server that has it for another application. And the two types of jobs that I ran into this all the time. I happened to do this kind of work for a very long time, so it was a constant struggle. I worked at a bank that was constantly buying smaller banks, and these smaller banks always had their own systems, always. And I worked as an IT contractor, and I was constantly going in right after a merger, and the IT guy had quit or been fired. And there was always data islands. I mean, I lived this problem that Unity Sync solves for so long. So what is Unity Sync? It's a centralized service that synchronizes data between directories. So think LDAP, maybe Exchange LDAP, eDirectory. I mean, we're talking all of them.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
The goal of Unity Sync is to provide an organization with a unified view of their different directories. Unity Sync can scale from a small directory with hundreds of objects to something like the enterprise scale, consisting of hundreds of thousands of objects without requiring any kind of extensive training. It's got a super easy to use web UI. You load it on your Linux box or a Windows box, log into the web UI, set up your commands, run dry runs, get email reports, check on what's going on, interact with the Perl scripting interface if you want to go even deeper, and then synchronize directories. That's really what it's all about. You can get the different account information between directories, so each information contains a unified view. You could just do single attributes. By defining an authoritative data source, you can have one system update individual attributes of both existing objects of another. And you could also do both. Of course, it works on Active Directory, Exchange 5.5, if you've got an old Exchange box, Oracle's Internet Directory, Zimbra, which I love.
Wow.
We haven't been talking a lot, but I love it. Lotus, GroupWise, Microsoft SQL, Microsoft Access, which, oh my God, that would have saved me so much time. Oracle
Oh, no
Sybase,
kidding, right?
LDIF.
Access alone. Jeez.
Oh man! The initial front end teller system that the bank that I worked at had all ran off of Access, and each branch required, because of that, each branch required its own terminal server with its own Access database. So at one point, we literally had 44 different Access databases for each branch, and then we would have to pull data together from all of those. I mean, Unity Sync would have literally saved multiple jobs. I mean, it is absolutely incredible. So if you're not a programmer, no problem. But if you are, then you can get into that Perl interface. You throw it on your Linux box, enterprise grade software under 5 megabytes. Some huge customers. Go over to derwiz.com/UnitySync. Check out that customer list. And then you know what I'm talking about. The companies in that list are quite impressive, and I got a good deal for you too. If you click on that download link, enter in the code Linux, and you'll get a 30-day trial, an extended trial, and your first year of maintenance for free if you decide to pull the trigger. That's a pretty good deal. Yeah. So thanks to Directory Wizards for sponsoring Linux Action Show. Love to see this kind of software. And by the way, moved over to Linux based on customer demand. Ported to Linux and built from the ground up to be a great Linux solution, and it runs right on that machine. It's super easy to use with that web interface too. So go to derwiz.com and check out Unity Sync. You'd probably become the hero of your IT department.
Nice. Oh, I would think so. I mean, imagine not only time you're saving, but just the amount of man hours and dollars.
I know, right? Okay, Mumble Room, last chance before we move on to our final topic for the day. Anybody got anything they want to add to the conversation?
I just wanted to say, if I can,
yeah, go ahead.
That it's very clear to me that if we're talking about new users, that we're talking about a Windows-like experience where the elements of the forms don't move into like the header bar, like they also are going to do now in GNOME 3, which is why I don't like that. And that the dock thing, that's very Mac-like. If people move to Mac, that's also very different. But if people move to Mac, that's a conscious decision. If people move to Linux, they're already skeptical.
That's an excellent point. Actually, that's an excellent point.
So where does that leave us then? So if you're saying, what you're saying is maybe it's futile to try to emulate the legacy desktop, or are you saying if we don't emulate the legacy desktop, then we won't be that refuge?
I think things like Cinnamon are a very good incentive for people to move from Windows XP to Linux, and that's why I think things like Cinnamon are good. And also desktops like Unity are very good for people that like them, but they're not very good for new users because the close button suddenly moves into the top banner and people lose it and stuff.
Moving UI elements kills, and hiding elements. And Canonical knows this is a bad practice, but the way they hide that file and edit menu, users. This is why Windows 8 has suffered. They are not like the techies that we want to dig in and we want to find. I love finding all the Easter eggs in like almost every other day I discover something completely new about KDE and it's just so awesome. right? That is not their outlook at all. That is not a good thing in their mind. If an UI element moves to them, they're not going to go hunting for it. They're not going to tuck their mouse in the corner to see what happens. They're not going to hover over a blank area and see if all of a sudden a mythical menu that should or should not be there pops up. Or is it in the gear this time? I'm not quite sure. This doesn't work.
Well, I think it's a great point because it's like the way we look at computers is the way a chef might look at gourmet cooking. I burn cereal. I literally pour it in a bowl and it sets itself on fire. It's just not my skill set. And so not everybody's going to want an advanced experience in everything they do. Some people do, some people don't. So I think computers definitely fall into that category. And I agree completely that for newer users, the stick and the carrot really is a desktop that feels similar to where they're coming from. I think that's more appealing in getting them to try something newer to make the switch completely.
All right, but then let me ask you this. Maybe Canonical's right all along. Maybe Microsoft is right. Maybe they shouldn't have fired Ballmer because maybe the only answer really is screw us old fogies. Somebody in the YouTube comments said, 5 years from now, we're going to look back at yesterday's episode of Linux Action Show and think it was quaint that we had all these opinions about convergence.
Sure.
Because
fair point.
we're sticking the muds is essentially what he's saying. You guys are sticking the muds. This is this problem you guys are trying to solve. Is this UI good for new users or is that guy UI not? Eliminate all of it. Just get rid of all of it and just reboot. You have one device. You learn to use that device. It does multiple things. You learn it once and you just use that thing to do all those.
Well, let me paint you a very, very real picture, and it actually involves an article about the myth that young people are really great with computers. They actually showed that was false. They're really good with mobile devices. They're not good with computers. They're absolutely useless with computers, and that's because that's how they were brought up into the touch thing that Chris and I have talked about on the show. Now, the adults, the people that are that were brought up with keyboards and mice and whatnot, that's the world we live in. And unless something's changed and we've become Lord of the Flies, the kids have not taken over quite yet. So we have a transition period that we still need to cater to people that still want to use things in a legacy fashion.
Yeah.
Now, for the future, I completely agree
maybe
that we're going to laugh at the way we used computers. I totally understand that. But you can't just go hot to cold water. You need to warm it up a little bit. You need to make that transition slow. And I think that's what Ubuntu is trying to do with their integration with the desktop and the phone and all that. But what they did with Unity was they pushed pretty hard, and it's fine, and it's serving its purpose and whatnot. But I think that people coming from Windows, you're still leaving a lot of them on the table. A lot of people aren't going to necessarily adapt themselves to Unity right out of the box. So I'm not running hot and cold on any one subject. I believe there's a time and a place for everything, but I think that you're either in one camp or another. It's just silly. Yes, this is actually the article.
There you go.
And read it. It will. I challenge anyone. Yeah.
I spent time. I think I mentioned it recently. I spent time at the local school district, and I definitely felt that. I definitely felt like kids were good with mobile, but they actually it wasn't that they were bad with computers. They just didn't hold any interest.
When I say they're bad, my nephew, 16 years old, very bright, can figure. He's shown me stuff on my Android phone I didn't know about. You park him in front of any operating system. I pop open a terminal or I do anything remotely, like installing a driver, and he thinks I'm a hacker. I'm not kidding. This is our future. And so read this article. I'll just leave it there. Read this article.
I will link it. I will link it in the show notes for folks, which I've been putting together at this show. No show notes ahead of time, assembling them as I go.
Yeah,
how about that?
That's great. Good stuff. But yeah, long story short, different strokes for different folks. That's really what I'm saying. I'm not belittling any one thing or nothing of that sort. I'm just simply saying there are no absolutes in this space. There really aren't.
Yeah, and I just want to. Before we wrap up for the day, because I don't think we're going to get to the desktop customizing stuff, but maybe we'll talk about that maybe next week. We got more show coming. There's more show. But one thing that really did quite well, the Bitmessage segment seemed to play really well with the audience. Looking at my Bitmessages right now, they've been rolling in all day.
Awesome.
I've been people trying it out. So also sent along, we were talking about one of the things that was kind of holding Bitmessage back potentially would be the integration with existing services. That way you could have essentially a multi-client, like Thunderbird could have a Bitmessage option, right?
And love that idea.
Yeah. So Anonymous on Bitmessage, because using Bitmessage, if you want to be, you can be totally anonymous. He says, I found something interesting that you might be able to use with Bitmessage. It's called Bitmessage Email Gateway. It allows you to view your Bitmessages in an email client, such as Thunderbird, Outlook, etc. You just have to enable the Bitmessage Client API, which is easy to do by adding a few settings in a DAT file. Also, the developer of this program has a hosted solution with a webmail UI for sending and receiving bit messages. Plus, it also supports sending and receiving regular email as well. There's a hosted solution at bitmessage.ch, and there is also a version you can download the code yourself.
Interesting. I love that.
Yeah.
Boy, I'm going to check that out.
So bitmessage.ch for the. Let's go look at that right now.
Maybe show notes that sucker too.
Yeah,
that sounds really cool.
And we also got just like tons of people like, hey, how's it going? I'm trying out Bitmessage. Just write me back so I know it works, And so I do. I try to at least because I don't want them to think it doesn't work. I'm going to open up one. So here was a Bitmessage we got in at 1:48 p.m. today. It says, hello, Chris and Matt. In your last show, you've been very busy complaining about Canonical's Ubuntu Edge Indiegogo campaign, and I have two things to say about that. Number one, I have another theory that why the campaign failed. There could be the possibility that Canonical set the goal at 32 million on purpose, so it doesn't succeed because they may not really be willing to make their own phone at all. I think they just did this campaign to get public attention and the attention of mobile service providers out there, so they could get software delivered at all. I really don't want number two. I really don't want you to turn the Linux Action Show into the Ubuntu Edge show. Maybe you could focus a bit less on Ubuntu Edge. Well, it's funny. Why would you be writing that in at the end of the campaign? Like, obviously, the campaign's over. It ran for 30 days, so we covered it during its run, and now it's done. But why would you write us in at the end of it and say, don't cover anymore? It's over.
It's over, so we won't be covering it. I think he was afraid that we might have additional afterthoughts.
You mean like we're doing right now?
Yeah, and that's why we have this show. So it allows us to not have to loop it into an entire another last.
Exactly.
So
yeah,
it's his now. As far as his point, honestly, that would make whoever's in charge of this stuff brilliant. Whoever comes up with these schemes. Now that being said, boy, I don't know. That's a pretty big stretch, but it would be an interesting point.
Max is not the first person to make this suggestion. I have also seen that this was. Remember, I have watched somebody I know make one embarrassing public disaster of a situation after another, and yet the PR only seems to continue on. It only seems there never seems to be a negative cost to it. So I have sort of come around to the potential that perhaps all PR is good PR. And so maybe Shuttleworth has to be crazy like a fox. And do you remember all those Macs we saw in the promo video? Remember how I had all the drawings on there? They were really working on it. So I don't know if that's true or not.
Yeah, because that to me isn't brilliant. And so, it's kind of a wash to where if this was done, and I've been part of similar things in the past. So if that's what he was describing, and that's why I say if he did, it was brilliant because I've been a part of that sort of stuff, and that is really brilliant. It wasn't my idea, it was somebody else's. But point being, I don't think that they have the wherewithal to actually put that together at this point. I think that it's Shuttleworth's way or the highway, and I don't mean that with a derogatory statement. I mean that he's the lead vision for the company, and the direction he wants to go is the direction they're going to go. And I don't think that's something he would come up with on his own.
What would have been awesome?
I don't think so.
I think what might have maybe made a bit of a difference is long time ago, one of the things that kind of put Ubuntu on the path of legitimacy is Shuttleworth like escrowed some funds for the project. Like, here's money that I have dedicated to the project. Do you remember this?
I do remember this, and it was much more transparent and visible back then.
Yeah.
Yes.
If there was something like that's like, here is a very public display of Canonical's ongoing commitment to making a very, very good desktop. Here it is. Here's an escrow account. I have funded this division of Canonical. They will operate as if they were, they are just their own division. They can continue to work their asses off while we focus on mobile, and they'll focus on that, and we'll meet up in the middle. And Here's the thing. And maybe that's exactly how it's structured, and maybe not. Don't know.
Well, so that's the whole point of it. Is they're always talking about transparency, but I've yet to see the podcast shows about the latest stuff they're working on. That is, not that they can talk about, of course. I want to see more behind the scenes stuff. I want to see these guys using their own product for God's sakes. I don't really ever see that. I see a lot of Macs, but I don't see a lot of Ubuntu usage. And I want to see more of that in their transparency approach. I want to see a podcast. I want to see not just audio, but I want to see video. I want to see actual footage of them using their stuff, brainstorming, bouncing ideas, shooting down ideas, accepting ideas. I want to actually feel like I'm part of that experience. Bring that to me. That's what I want.
Yeah, it is a good opportunity. They could be this is going to sound so corny when I say it, but if you give it some thought, maybe it's not so corny. They could be the social company. They could be the social operating system company. I don't mean make a bunch of Twitter integration into Ubuntu. What I mean is they're lean and scrappy enough that they could be utilizing. Well, I mean, they do utilize G+ and YouTube quite a bit, but
they talk at you. It's not effective.
Exactly. Yeah,
it really isn't.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's get off. I'm really getting sick of talking about Canonical.
Me too. Yeah.
So I hope if you've been burned out on it, I feel like I'm spent. So I think
we're right
done.
there with you.
All right. So one last email I just want to cover because it's kind of positive. The bright future of Linux servers came in via Bitmessage. God, we got a lot of emails too. This is crazy, Matt. Maybe next week we will only do emails. I don't know.
That's probably a good way to kind of clean out some of the
It's too fun though. We're just having too much fun.
Yeah, and we can spread it out too.
That's true. That's true. We got a long haul ahead of us. All right, Mike B here says he's a new supporter of Unfiltered, by the way, which we appreciate that, Mike. He says he's currently got a Xeon E3 server at home. He runs ZOL and which is RAID Z2, as Alan would say. That is what that breaks down to is 8 2TB Western Digital red drives. So he's got 8 2TB WED drives, 2TB WED drives, 16 gigabytes of RAM, and he's running Ubuntu 12.04. Server host, it's like a NAS, a BitTorrent, Usenet, Sickbeard, Spotweb, SAB, NZB. Awesome. Wow. Nice. Dude. Mumble server, an IRC server, Nginx. Ooh. Dude's got it loaded, right?
Hook me up.
I know.
Yeah, that's awesome.
He says he's been looking to try to migrate his data off of Google. He doesn't like getting tied into that, ecosystem. He says he's worried about data leakage, but he says crawling away seems really difficult. Therefore, I've been looking to set up a mail server implementation with OpenVPN and SSH, and give some replacements. One thing I've been unsatisfied about is the lack of isolation I have on the server. Several of the apps I run are straight off of the Git repos, and everything is executed the same user space. Per your mention of Docker on last episode a few weeks ago, I've begun to move my applications into their own containers. I feel the data security on a VPS is an issue that isn't mentioned enough. Like the old saying goes, if someone has physical access to all your servers, all bets are off. That's true. I do agree. It kind of depends, I suppose, how the VPS works. Like if it's a Zen level or KVM VPS, where you are in your own isolated KVM machine, I'm a little less worried about that. If it's user space applications that are simply running as a Matt user, Chris user type VPS, that I definitely worry about a lot.
That would be a concern, sure.
It's interesting. He goes on to talk a little bit more about Docker. And Michael Dominic from Coda Radio is currently working on a project, and he's investigating the use of Docker. Remember we covered Docker? We had that photo with the rainbow.
Yes.
That was great. Docker is huge, he says. It isn't touted enough as removing the barriers of application packaging. I can choose per container targets to target the best stream of packages updates for that particular app. It's OS agnostic, Yum, Deb, Tar, GZ, Pacman, whatever. It doesn't matter. So what he's saying here is you could be on Fedora 18. And I could be on my latest, greatest Arch, and I could package up Bitmessage and put it in a Docker container and send it over to you, and you could deploy that Docker container and run it just fine on your machine because all of the dependencies, all of the executables, the Arch environment would exist in that Docker container to the extent they are different from your machine.
That would be fantastic.
So it could be a really cool way to deploy software.
Oh, I'd say I can't see a better way. I mean, that sounds awesome.
And everything's is contained within that security zone too. So he says, sorry to frustrate Alan, but he thinks that the Linux future looks brighter than BSD, and ZFS being enterprise ready and working on Linux is just a win-win for Linux. So all in all, he says, keep up the great work on Jupiter Broadcasting. Thanks, Mike.
Yeah, it's good stuff.
Yeah,
And I disagree somewhat. I think that BSD and Linux cater to different needs, different folks, they just cater differently. So I can't say one's brighter than the other. I definitely could not say that. I think they're both very bright, though.
And I may or may not say that there could be a BSD podcast in the near future. I don't know. Who knows? How could somebody know that? Who would know that? Who would possibly have knowledge of that kind of thing coming?
Cannot imagine. I mean, the speculation alone.
I know the speculation could just get ridiculous. And if there were people that the community loved that were going to be on the show on a regular basis, that would be really outlandish. And I don't know where people are getting that from, Matt.
Anarchy.
I'm a little incensed. People are just making what? What did Alan say in the chat room? Oh. Well, I don't know who this Alan guy is. I don't know who you guys are talking about.
Alan who?
Not familiar with Alan. Not familiar.
Don't know any Alan.
All right, so I put the story of my KDE troubles in the show notes if people are curious of the process I went through and the packages I updated and how I fixed it. In case you have that same problem, you can just copy my commands if you want. Just be careful. I claim no warranty. I also put links to the email gateway for Bitmessage, Oleg's thoughts on our Ubuntu Edge coverage, the kids can't use computers and why that should worry you article Matt mentioned, as well as the Bitmessage email gateway. And I also want to give a special mention to that wiki page. People are starting to work on it right now, which is awesome. We'll be talking about more. If you didn't know, which I doubt at this point, but we created a wiki entry over at linuxactionshow.reddit.com, and we are trying to get the community to come together on really fleshing out all of the different options and solutions for rolling your own email system, taking your email back onto your LAN or putting it on a VPS, whatever is best for your situation, whatever that might be. And how to do that, what software is available, what things have people tried, what worked best, what didn't work, what do people need to know about DNS-wise, what do people need to know about spam filter, all that kind of stuff. We want to make a living document repository of this kind of thing, so that way, as it comes up, which I, for some reason, suspect it will more and more, we have a resource to point people towards, something that is up to date and current.
Oh, I'm excited about it because really, I've looked at other attempts and they never really hit the mark. They're always missing massive components or things you need to know. And the way ours is shaping up, I'm really excited about the prospect of it. I'm looking forward to running it myself.
Yeah. I haven't really picked a domain name yet that I'm going to use for my home. But the wife and I have been kicking around a few ideas, so I'm going to use our Linux 249. I'm going to pick up a .com. I'm going to get I'm just going to start fresh. I'm going to give it out to some people. The email address. I'll probably let it slip on the show on accident. That's fine. That's fine. Whatever. But like right now, my quote unquote personal email account, my Gmail, is a mess. It's decimated, Matt. It's decimated.
Oh, I'm sure.
And then my business email gets all the show emails. So like that's decimated, man. It's decimated. It's just decimated.
And I try and keep mine pretty carefully quiet. I have a contact page I hand out, and some people have my personal, and it's fine. But I don't. I try to keep it under control because I can still manage it right now. So
well, I thankfully early on G Plus had this little thing, or Buzz had this little thing that just like released my email address to the public, so everybody had it. So I was like, all right, I'm done with that.
See, that was your problem. You participated in Buzz. I was buzzless.
Yeah, I did. So if you want to go over to the wiki, it's linked right now. You know what? I'm going to link it in the show notes too, but it'll also be linked at the top of the Linux Action Show subreddit. It's a wiki. So you go into in fact, I'll link right to the self-hosted email section. You go in there and just start working, you create the page, and then you link it, just like you would on a regular wiki. One little thing that's different, I love it, but it's probably going to be weird for somebody who's used to using like a Wikipedia or something. It uses Markdown for the formatting. Markdown's awesome. We use it for all of our show notes. So the really kind of nice thing about the wiki that we're creating over there is I can literally go in and edit a post and copy line by line the Markdown and paste it. Like if we needed like a reference for our show notes, and I can paste it directly into the show notes, and it will be formatted perfectly for the post.
Oh, that makes for a nice smooth transition going back and forth.
So it's a little wonky maybe if you're new to Markdown, but for the production purposes of the show, it's actually extremely convenient. So I figured since we already have a good community over on the Linux Action Show subreddit, that was a good spot to toss it. I wasn't sure where to put it at first, but that just seemed like a good spot for it to go. So we'll have that link too in the show notes.
Definitely. Well, and if you're new to the Markdown thing, just Google around. Once you get used to the syntax, it's really not that bad.
Yeah, and there's some really good online Markdown preview utilities, so you can experiment like in one pane. It's if you search Markdown online preview or something like that, preview online. One pane is the Markdown code, one pane is the HTML code, and you can, in real time, tweak your Markdown and see how it formats in HTML. It's super nice JavaScript. Don't need to load any software. Wham, bam. Thank you, ma'am. Well, Matt, I think we'll leave it at that today, but we're going to maybe hang out a little bit with the guys on Mumble after the show.
Yeah.
So we're not all done, but we'll wrap up the recording. Thank you guys for joining us today. Matt, thank you for joining me. Don't forget Tuesday next week.
Tuesday, got the note, got the calendar, we're all set.
We're moving. I'll update the Jupiter Broadcasting calendar right after we get off the air. Email us linuxactionshow@jupiterbroadcasting.com or send us a Bitmessage or start a thread in that subreddit. We're in there all the time. linuxactionshow.reddit.com. Hey, thanks for joining us for Linux Unplugged. We'll see you right back here on Monday, or Tuesday actually, and we'll see you on Sunday for the big show. Thanks, everybody.